All right, YouTube, welcome back. My name is Jason Kapnick. I'm a Jiu-Jitsu black belt with over 20 years of strength and conditioning experience. And in today's video, I'm going to go over what my program looks like, what I do in the gym, how do I set my goals, and what does my program look like. So if you're interested in that, stick around. All right, so when we start with programming, let's just set some kind of context here. I'm 39. I've been doing jujitsu, multiple times per week, a lot of times multiple times per day for about a decade now. Staying on the mat and spending as much time on the mat as possible is a huge priority to me. My gym work supports my mat work. To me, the gym stuff doesn't really stand on its own like it does for some people. And what I mean by that is some people want to have jujitsu and they also want to have weightlifting. They have goals in the weight room, they have physique goals. And for me, that's not really important. Really, everything I'm doing in the gym is to support my jujitsu. And I try to spend as little time as possible in the gym and as much time as possible on the mat. And the reason that I spend time in the gym is it makes me more explosive, more powerful, more able to have quick bursts of explosive energy on the mat, um, you know, improves flexibility and improves resilience to injury. And those things are really important, especially as you get older. So, again, just to kind of summarize those program goals, improve flexibility where appropriate. This is not a flexibility program. I think the stretching and flexibility stuff kind of takes place on the side. But at the same time, I don't want to be doing a whole lot of limited range of motion exercises that are going to compromise my flexibility, and then I have to work against that. So where appropriate, trying to develop strength at end ranges. There's a big focus on power and strength, particularly rotational power. We've talked about it in the past on this channel, how most of our power and most of our movement in the mat is expressed rotationally. And as much as possible, I want to be able to rotate quickly. And not only will that improve mat performance, it also leads to really good development and balanced development of your musculature, which again, reducing injury being another big goal of being here in the gym. From a conditioning perspective, I also, I want to be able to support repeated bouts of explosive movement, kind of, an anaerobic recovery, anaerobic power. There's been times in my strength and conditioning and jiu-jitsu career where I've kind of neglected that. And I felt good from a cardio perspective in that I can go a lot of rounds in live sparring and at open mat, but I don't have that sixth gear to really floor it when I need to. Feel just too tired to get up to there, but recovering quickly between rounds. To me, that's a sign of underdeveloped anaerobic power. And that's something I've prioritized a lot in recent years. And now I feel like, hey, when I have to sprint, when I have to scramble, I have that extra gear. And we'll talk about that as we get into the programming here. Okay, and from here we can kind of go into how the workouts are organized. We have a workout A, a workout B, and a workout C. Workout A and B, in a lot of ways, I feel like are based on kind of traditional Olympic weightlifting structures for workouts in that they have a snatch and a clean and jerk. But we're not using the Olympic weightlifting movements here. I'm using landmines, kettlebells, sandbags, as you can see here. And then my workout C, to me, is more of a traditional kind of lifting. But let's talk about each one. So workout A, I have the Landmine University Clean and Jerk, and I have kettlebell snatches. The Landmine University Clean and Jerk is just a fantastic exercise to be able to handle a lot of heavy weight very violently with a lot of velocity through rotational movement. We talked about it a couple weeks ago on this channel. I highly recommend those. Kettlebell snatch, and now we're starting to get into what I was talking about earlier as far as anaerobic power development. What I try to do with the kettlebell snatch for a lot of the year is just going heavy, really developing that power, sets of 3, 4, 5, and 6, with a lot of times maybe more rest than you might think, to really develop that big output and then let my aerobic system recover that. And then, again, work on creating that output. As we get closer to competition or as we shift focus in our training, I might use the kettlebell for more cardiovascular and glycolytic conditioning, which we'll talk about as we get into some of this too. Workout B here, I have landmine snatch. I think a lot of the things I said about landmine clean and jerk are also true of landmine snatch. Just a fantastic exercise that lets us work with high velocity through rotation. Sandbag clean and press is interesting. So that's kind of my overhead movement for the day. I go through a lot of different variations of overhead movement. Recently, I've used barbell clean and press with a focus on the pressing in that case. I've used kettlebell push press. And again, I'm kind of focused with a lot of this, with this exercise in particular, rather, on some overhead strength here. And basically, the reason that I'm talking about so many different varieties of pressing is that get to a point where you kind of hit, not a wall, but where, hey, you're starting to feel that resistance. And particularly with overhead movement, that can make your neck tight, can be very difficult to recover from. Our shoulders, elbows, wrists already take a beating on the mat. I approach these very conservatively. So, for example, when barbell clean and press started getting difficult, cycle off and move over to kettlebell push press. Started getting up heavy in weights with those, made some good progress on that, and then say, hey, before I get the temptation to really push it and really start setting PRs, and then finding out, yeah, I went a little bit too hard and I just, my neck's tight, my shoulders are tight on the mat. I've just overdone it with the overhead motion. We'll look to just switch it up and keep things fresh. I do the Nordic hamstring curls on this day. And then we have assistance work. We'll talk about assistance work in a second, but it's really de-emphasized. I do a couple sets of things that are important to me, and we'll talk about that in a moment. On workout C here, we do some mace and club swings. I have an extended range of motion chest press and bird dog row. I do those as a superset. The chest press and the bird dog row. The chest press being a great exercise we've talked about before on this channel for developing strength at the end range of motion for the pecs. The bird dog row is an exercise where you're balancing in the bird dog position and doing a dumbbell or kettlebell row. Another fantastic exercise. And, Zercher squat, I'm certainly not the first person on YouTube to talk about how important or how useful Zercher squats are for grapplers, but a really great squatting variation that develops core strength, develops, you know, a lot of strength, not just through the legs, but the ability to translate that strength and bear it, hold it with the upper body. It's also very forgiving on the elbows and wrists and shoulders, as opposed to putting a bar on your back for back squat can be tough on your elbows and wrists and shoulders. They're already getting a beating on the mat from jujitsu. And then on workout C, we'll often have some assistance work as well. So what's a typical assistance work look like? You know, Typically I'll do the same thing for a couple weeks in a row as I need to work on something. Not always. Sometimes I do exercises on a one-off basis. I could sit here and tell you, oh, I use a multi-attribute conjugate concurrent and use a lot of big words, but honestly, in a lot of cases, it's what do I feel like I need to work on? For example, lately, my elbows have been a little bit inflamed from all the from the framing, whatnot, playing guard here. So as I add more direct arm work to my routine, I alleviate a lot of that strain on my elbows, getting stronger through the triceps and biceps. So that's been a big focus. I do get my core work in through the assistance work, but again, it's the dessert, not the entree. A little bit of assistance work is all you need. If it was important enough to prioritize, then we wouldn't be calling it assistance work. But examples: bicep curls, skull crushers, different variations of pull-ups, GHD sit-ups. Again, some core work, toes to bar. Sometimes it's a conditioning exercise like the air bike, Tabatas, side bends, GHD raise. Might supplement the hamstring work, landmine split switch, Bulgarian split squat, some extra leg work, and grip work could be captain's a crush or different, grip implements. So, a lot of different exercises there, and that's kind of how I organize my weekly split. So then the next question becomes, how do you program that? So I'm going to give you a couple examples for some of the bigger exercises. The overarching thing that I would tell you on programming is not to overthink it. I used to teach the kettlebell workshops, and trainers would come in and, how do we do the wave load and what's the right, volume and how do we balance intensity and volume? I think a lot of times when you just come in and you work hard with the intent to get stronger, that's probably like 80% of programming. And, for jujitsu, I would give the additional advice that you don't want to overdo it. Less is typically more. Jiu-jitsu is very stressful already on the body, or it can be. And, again, we want to prioritize the time we spend on the mat. So if we go so heavy in the gym that we feel beat up on the mat, that's not the point. So the first example I'll give here is landmine snatch. This took place here. This probably is a couple months worth of training. So it looks like in week 1 here, this comes straight out of my journal. Looks like I did 95 for a double. 5/5 means I did 5 sets per side. So, 5 doubles on the left, 5 doubles on the right, every 90 seconds. It was tough, but good. Next week, I did singles, 6 on each side. We did that every minute on the minute. And then we're still kind of working at these same weights, building a base here. 95 now for triples, 4 each side, with a minute rest, and that was good. In week 4, we added a little bit of variety here. It looks like we worked up to 3 heavy singles at 105, and then we went for a little bit more explosive work of 1 clean and then 1 snatch, for 4 per side there. In week 5, we're up to 95 pounds for 5 and 5. And this was good and easy. And you can see, I'm just trying to make progress here. I'm subject to whatever the, demands of the week of training are. Some weeks, you have more tough rounds versus less tough rounds. Some days you're feeling more beat up versus less beat up, different sleep, et cetera, all the things that can impact your training. But, using a lot of singles and low reps here, using time controls to keep the workouts efficient, and just trying to get stronger over time. Kettlebell snatch is another one I'll talk about for just kind of like a progression example here. It looks like I started off the exercise with 36 kilo for 4 sets, and I did 6 sets per side. 4 reps with 6 sets per side. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just do it untimed. I start a timer at the beginning of the workout, I throw it in the corner, and then at the end of those, I see, all right, how long did that take me? And then that dictates my time control for subsequent weeks. And, it's probably coming to this kettlebell snatch after, making some changes in the program. Again, like we said, when we start getting really heavy with the exercises, instead of pushing for PRs and continuing to, want for more and more and more in the gym, one approach that I take to manage my stress is to switch exercise and start easier on something else. And we'll talk about this as this goes here. So, over weeks 2 and 3 and 4, it looks like there was some work done here where I'm working with that 40 kilo, either for 3 per side, switching sides each minute, or 3 on each side, in each minute, and doing that for a certain number of minutes. Looks like I worked with a 32 kilo here for some sprint work. And you can see by week 5, I'm using 40 kilo for sets of 3, 7 on 7 and 7, which is 14 minutes. And then in week 6, feeling really strong, 12 minutes of 4s with a 40 kilo. Wrote down hell yeah in my journal. And when you're going heavy and writing down hell yeah, a lot of times that's a good, what I've learned, at least for me personally, is that continuing to push for PRs is when I get overextended and I start to run into problems, either excessive fatigue or injury. So, all right, we're back down to 32 kilo, and we're using this quick and the dead time control, which is a more conditioning focus as opposed to the first 6 exercises, first 6 workouts being more power focused. And I think this shift towards the quick and the dead time control coincided with a bigger focus on conditioning as we get ready for competition, for a tournament. And finally, here is a progression example. I'll give you a Zercher squat. Not necessarily going to read every single week to you, but this comes from an old Pavel program. On the Pavel program, you would do a heavy set of 5, 3, and 2, and then back the weight off 20%, and do 3 sets of 5 with 2-minute rest. Just given how stressful, again, jiu-jitsu is, taking a little bit of volume off of it. So instead of doing 5, 3, and 2 at the heavy weight, it's kind of feeling the heavy weight for a couple of triples here. And, you can see in week 1, I think it's coming off a little bit of a layoff. This progression is from a couple years ago. And yeah, I think it was, I had COVID, had just moved to Florida, etc. So starting light here with this 275, two triples, you can see the rest, um, and just building up from there. The soreness is going to be really real when you have a new exercise or you haven't done a whole lot of heavy Zercher squats. So, building up by week 4, it seems like we've hit our stride here. We're working at 345 for the triples, taking some weight off the bar, and then just doing that really fast tempo 3 sets of 5. So just trying to move the bar as quickly as possible, rest for 2 minutes, and then come in, quick and violent. Um, Looks like week 5 was a little bit of a deload for whatever reason, and then as we get into week 6 here, we acclimate and build up to a heavy triple at 365. And from here, we're really consolidating, going towards a really strong finish here of 365, 375, 385. And in week 10 here, you see I hit 405 for two triples, and then did my back off sets. And, again, at that point, I remember that workout. That was tough. That was awesome. I felt amped about it. And rather than going to 425 the next week and then feeling like, oh man, that was maybe a little bit too much, now we've switched to safety bar squat, a 12-inch box, working on some flexibility there. And yeah. So anyway, that's kind of what my program looks like, and hopefully that gives you guys some ideas for my style of training and what I'm doing. Um, you know, I encourage you to swipe my program wholesale, take your screenshots, whatever. If you're interested in working with me directly on programming, send me an email, jason.kapnick@gmail.com, and can definitely help you set up a program like this for yourself. Until next time, thanks so much.